Hi, everyone. I am Mariana Ortega, and I am the founder and principal of Cultural Compass Coaching and Consulting. If you haven't come to my YouTube channel before, I identify as a first generation professional who is also a leadership coach. So I'm really excited to be here today with somebody who is also a first generation professional and is passionate about that topic. Joseph, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Joseph May. I'm an executive director for the YMCA of Greater Richmond. One of the things that I would like to say is I am a first generation professional. It wasn't until I met Mariana that I understood that for myself. And she definitely helped me to understand a lot more about it. So I'm excited to be here because we've had some good conversations since that first time we met. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And just for those who might not be familiar with what or who a first generation professional is, generally the definition is it is an individual from a working class or low income background who is the first in their family to graduate from a 4-year higher education institution and achieve a white collar career. So, is there anything else that, from your perspective, that you would also add to that definition?
I would say as an individual that recognizes the struggle between being raised in their home and ascending to, like, I guess I would say maybe a social class or a level to where they're not used to, and therefore they're kind of there's kind of a conflict that they're having. Am I losing a little bit of myself? Am I losing my heritage? Am I losing my culture? I think a first generation professional is someone that understands that and is probably going through that right now, but just never put a name to it. They have all, I guess you say they have all the symptoms, but never the diagnosis. So,
So, from your experiences as a first generation
yeah.
professional, one of the things that we said we wanted to talk about is the experience of being a first gen professional
Yeah.
and going through that class migration and the impact that that has on your relationships, the dynamics of family, your, kind of your culture, your inner circle. That's something that I know that when we connected, we kind of had a lot to say about. But there's so many facets to it. And
Yeah.
I guess maybe getting started is from your own experience. What were some of the things that, as you started to really advance and achieve in your career, that maybe shifted from a family dynamic or personal perspective?
So I would say it was the education was the first thing that was a big shift for me. I was the first to graduate in my family, in my immediate family, with a college degree, and so going out into the workforce, having a college degree, starting off at a different level, right? And not to degrade any or belittle anyone, but I just remember my father. He started off working at Southwestern Bell, climbing telephone poles, right? And I didn't start off doing manual labor. My father did. My mother, she did as well. And so that was different, right? Because when we had to do manual labor, when I first started to do, before I got into everything, I started social work, and I didn't do manual labor, right? So I was expecting it at the same time. And then when there are opportunities to do something, do some heavy lifting or moving things, I jumped right into it as if it was my job. And that was really, really hard. My father actually is the one who had to kind of talk to me because as I got promoted and I was able to um, achieve different levels in that part, I had to learn not to do that anymore, right? And I had to learn to let people do their jobs and let them do it well, right? And so that was, I would say, that was hard for me in the beginning. That was really hard because that was eye opening. It was eye opening because I thought I was just serving, but because I was out there doing some of the work that I was not required to do, I couldn't be in my office planning, right? I couldn't be planning strategically. I couldn't make sure that we had enough money in the budget. I couldn't map out the business narrative for the budget, right? Because I was too busy outside doing other things. And I think that's hard for first generation professionals because you see your family grow up, you see your parents doing things, and you kind of feel compelled to do it, right now. It's a good work ethic. I would say that I learned a good work ethic out of that, and I'm not afraid to, like, go out and use a mop or help out any way that I can. But it was a very humbling experience to realize that my father, when he told me just point blank, I don't want you to have the life that we had to have, starting off. So that's why I want you to go to college. That's why I want you to become a professional. And that was very humbling, humbling opportunity for me to learn. So I was very appreciative of it. So that was one of my struggles for sure. What about you?
Well, I think you just kind of established your first gen cred with that story because it's exactly that. I think there's maybe some, or there can be some confusion as to like who qualifies as first
Yeah,
gen.
yeah,
And to me, it is really that socioeconomic beginning and the navigation and kind of acclimation of transitioning from, a lower class to maybe a middle class or upper middle
hmm
class status that can really, first of all, it starts to kind of reshape your identity in a way because you are, starting to explore areas and experiences that were not accessible to you before when trying to kind of navigate that. But also, it's like you don't want to lose who you are. You don't want to forget where you came from. And not
yeah.
people around you that have known you and loved you your whole life don't always understand that dilemma. It's, we kind of have this, like you said, like this gratitude of, the work ethic that was instilled in us, the importance of, kind of going forward and doing better than your parents did and, having that support. It comes along with some kind of unexpected baggage. I think that
My parents' dream, even though that was my parents' dream at the time, it feels kind of disingenuous, right? Disingenuous. It feels as almost as a slap in the face to them, right? You're doing well, you're doing better. Um, you're doing things now, like, I've gone horseback riding, right? It was through my job. That's not something my dad ever told me about. I couldn't go to him. It was like, how do you ride the horse? And what do you do? Going out for expensive business lunches and discussing things, being in certain circles, having influence, things that he had to work for. My dad did very well. He would always say that he was an old dinosaur, but he was able to get to the top, right? Because he just worked hard. He literally climbed a ladder to get to where he was. And so for me, I didn't have to start from the same rings of that ladder. And so that was hard because you do feel like you're not honoring your heritage, like you gave something up. I would also say there's that struggle of you start to learn more and you start to have more experiences that they didn't have, kind of to a point what you were saying. And then the question is, can I relate now? Right? So now you're understanding technical terms, you're using verbiage that they may not use when you were growing up, and that's hard because it it made me wonder, did I disconnect from my culture? And where I'm from, we would call it selling out. Did I sell out? Am
yeah,
I not being true to who I am or who I or where I came from? And that's really, really hard to kind of walk through, especially if you're a first generation professional, because generally you don't know who to talk to about that, right? You don't know who to
yeah,
talk
it's
to
the
about that
worst.
struggle. And so you just have this internal struggle at work. Am I selling out at home? Am I acting like somebody different? Am I really being authentically myself? And that's just really hard because it's hard to understand, especially if people did not have the same experiences and they can't understand it. Whether it's at work with coworkers or whether it's when I go back and I talk to my family and they might not understand what I'm going through and the struggles that I'm having. And that puts you in a weird place. It's a weird place to be. So,
For sure. It's like, my parents, both worked blue collar jobs. So, my mom was everything from like a chambermaid to like, kind of like an off the books bookkeeper for a small little construction company. And my dad was, everything from a janitor to a school security guard, like, and he had had a successful career in the military, for 30 years, but not like in a high ranking capacity. So he all he had was his military experience, which was substantial. It was 30 years. But, I think when I took the kind of more, I don't know, depending on how you're looking at less traditional, more traditional path, right? Of going to college after high school and then, kind of deciding that I wanted to do something in the white collar corporate world after that. It creates like this or it can create kind of this weird mix of pride and resentment because I think it's hard for both sides of it. There can be an increasing sense of distance, I think, for the people that, came up with, whether that's your family or your friends, because they see that you're kind of less available, you're doing different things, and these are not things that they can necessarily relate to firsthand. So I think there starts to be a sense of like, where do we find the commonality now? But it's also this, for the first gen professional, I think it creates some, definitely some guilt that you're falling with people who, have loved and supported you, but also like confusion because your core values haven't necessarily changed, who have also had to, out of necessity, adopt or adapt your behavior and worldview a little bit to
Yeah,
be able to
yeah,
navigate these other spaces.
yeah. And someone explained to me best about being authentically you, but evolving, right? And it was some of the best advice I've ever heard about that. Like, so how do I evolve? How do I continue to grow professionally and personally, but also how do I maintain vast roots to where I came from, right? An example I have there's my hair, right? So I never braided my hair. I always wanted to. I grew locks out for a little bit when I was a teenager, but I was told like when I became an adult, it's not professional, right? And so I cut it all off. In the military, I had to have it cut off. But one of the things that I ran into as I got older, I'm trying to encourage younger men to be professionals, to go in the corporate world or whatever it may be. And when I'm talking to them, they're all motivated, but they all have like braids, they all have locks. And so I'm looking at them and I'm just thinking to myself, how can I sit there and tell them they can do anything but cut your hair, right? And so I grew my hair out. And I think one of the things that I started to run into was I started to have that internal struggle of I can't have hair. I can't have it locked up. I can't have it braided. Everyone else can grow the hair out, but I can't because it doesn't look professional, right? And then so that's the authentic part, right? I understand the history behind locks. I understand the history behind braids and cornrows and where they come from. And so from a historical perspective, it actually is very professional. It actually does make sense. It actually does connect me deeper back to my heritage and my roots. But I have to be willing, and as a first gen professional, this is what I had to find out. I had to be willing to display that authenticity, right? As opposed to hide it. Now, evolving doesn't mean I want to come in like I was dressed when I was 14 or 15, where we had cross-colored jeans. It was a bad idea at the time. But cross-colored jeans and all these big baggy shirts, right? So I'm not going to come in dressed like that anymore because I evolved as an individual. I evolved as a professional, and I understand that now. But when you have those struggles between authenticity and evolving or evolution, like that's once again where you need another first-year professional or someone who's done it way longer than you have to just talk to you through it, right? Just really walk you through what does it look like. Is this me being authentic or is this me evolving? And then is understanding too that not every first-gen professional looks alike. That's hard to get, right? They're not all the same color. They're not all the same race. They're not all
Right.
the same ethnicity. Um, and understanding that was really helpful. As a matter of fact, you helped me understand that, so let me give you credit for that. It's really helpful because you realize there are things that people can relate to, right? We don't have to look alike, talk alike, or think alike to relate. But there are probably some things that we can connect on, and that's where I see myself growing even now, connecting with people who are different than me, but understand some of the struggles that I have.
Yeah, I think that's a huge kind of misconception is that first generation professional is kind of code for immigrant or it's code for, a kind of historically marginalized group. And that's not the case. Like a poor white teenager from Appalachia who decides that they're going to go to college and maybe pursue a professional white collar career is going to run into many of the same challenges as someone from a Puerto Rican background for myself or a black man like yourself. Like there are, I guess really what I'm saying is that social class is an identity and a culture, as well as a socioeconomic status. And we carry that culture as part of us. And that's kind of what makes it interesting to navigate in these spaces that are really, the expectations are based in upper class norms. So, one of the things that I think is really interesting and underappreciated about the first gen experience is we kind of come built in with this idea that we want to bring everybody with us,
Yes.
right? Like we understand the impact of what it is that we're doing and what we are about to endeavor on. And there's this like, okay, I'm going to be the one to kind of lift everyone up. And this can create, a lot of kind of unforeseen tension because you become this like bridge role for your family, or you can become almost like this middle class translator. So, it's just kind of like one of those things where, you feel like that's what you should be doing, right? Like that was the point of all this, is you should be able to now take care of all the people that took care of you. But that can come with kind of unforeseen reactions that, if you're not prepared for it, can seem like, well, what did I do wrong? Or why is this bad? Or, it can be kind of like a mixed message. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to.
No, no, it's because I think for first generation professionals, you come from places where you're looking back, right? You're kind of trained to look back and not look forward. So if one of us gets out here, we all get out here. If one of us makes it, we all make it. And generally, the person who's either the most educated, has the most money, or is the most successful is the one you're going to call for wisdom, right? Because they achieved greatness in some kind of capacity. And so I think what the struggle comes in is, even if I achieve those things, I still don't feel qualified, right? I still don't feel like I can do it. I still don't feel like that I have that much to offer, because whether you're my parent, you raised me, whether you're my brother, you're my sister, and I saw how great you did and I looked up to you as a kid, you don't necessarily feel like you can. And I think, and then the struggles when you come to the point where you're actually helping and you're actually leading and you're giving good advice, right? That's almost a scary point, because now, am I saying that my family is not as smart as I am? Am I saying that my mother and father aren't as smart as me? And that's not necessarily the case, but it can feel like that. And then all of a sudden, now I'm going to clamp up. Now I'm going to get nervous and I'm going to get scared because I don't know how to respond. I don't know how to explain, because if I do, I feel like I'm offending, right?
Yes.
Or even like if you're sitting there and you have some advice that you can give, that's hard too, right? Because you might know the answer or solution to a problem, but how do I respond to that? What do I say? So do I keep it to myself? Do I just let it go as it is? If I hear something that's incorrect, do I correct it? Or do I just let it go? Right? So you have all those thoughts going through your head, and what I find is that can rob you of having fun or enjoying your family. So I think as a first year professional, you have to find that good, I don't want to say balance, but learning when to let some things go and learning when to step up and do something. Right? If somebody's having a medical crisis, because I work in healthcare, I'm not the best, but I can kind of walk you through it. If somebody is having, it could be something wrong with their phone, technical problems, you probably don't want to call me. But I can tell you can call, right? And I think as a first generation professional, it's just learning that and then helping people to see that, right? Because what it does, it humanizes you all over again. And yeah, I mean, if it's still true in my family, if one of us makes it, we all make it. But I've learned that if somebody makes it, I can celebrate them. They don't have to take me with them. I can just sit back and watch and celebrate them. And then I don't have to take everyone with me. I can go forward, right? And sometimes it'll be going by yourself. Sometimes it'll be going with some, but not all. Sometimes it is going with all. But at the end of the day, just realizing, figuring that out, it was important to me. And it definitely helped me become who I am today.
It's so interesting, kind of the shifting family roles, and kind of also how this ties into intergenerational trauma. Because a lot of times when you're the first generation professional, it's like, oh, you're the one to fix everything that went wrong in the past. You are now kind of like the example that made all that other heartache worth it. And this it's a lot, right? Because those those family challenges of having to navigate new expectations while also managing perceptions of how you may be showing up differently. I think it's the one of the most emotionally taxing aspects of the class migration experience for first generation professionals, because to us it's like it can almost feel like even though we're doing really well and we are achieving the things that we wanted and that our parents wanted for us, it feels almost like that success can threaten the relationships that matter most. It creates an internal conflict between personal advancement and family and kind of cultural loyalty that I don't know ever fully resolves. But I'd love kind of your take on that.
Well, I think it is. So you will understand family trauma differently now, right? As a first generation professional, because you learn different things. Like, I've got, I had to take courses and everything from psychology, sociology, theology, and you start to learn about different traumas, different triggers, all those things. You start to learn about it in an unbiased way, right? So you start to understand that even though your situation molded and shaped you, it doesn't necessarily mean it was okay, right? And that's hard, because then there's some things that you might have to talk about. There's some things that you might have to do taboo things like go into counseling about, right? And that's hard. That's hard because now you're starting to see the imperfections of your parents, right? The imperfections of being even who you are, right? You start to recognize those things, and that's really difficult, because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? All those cliches start coming back in my head, and then I get the feeling that no, I this helped me. This is who I am today. It made me tough, right? Not realizing it could have made you callous. It could have made you vengeful and bitter, and you're probably still hurting because of it. And so I just had to realize I had to slow down and really take an inventory of what I'm going through and what I've been through and how I got to where I am. And not everything that happened growing up was good, but not everything that happened was bad, right? And so there is some adjective to the thick skin. You got to have thick skin as a professional, because you are expected to fix some things. Some things cannot be fixed. Some sides cannot be taken, right? And so it's more of understanding, as a first generation professional, you're now growing and evolving with your family. You're growing and evolving with your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters. And it's a different world now. And so you just evolve. You just evolve the best as you can in the most gracious way as you can. That's my experience.
As I'm hearing you talk, I feel like one of the ways that this showed up that wasn't like, it wasn't like this profound event or something, but it was like this ongoing, I don't know, symptom of this class migration transition, which was style of communication. And it's something that kind of, it worked against me in both ways, in both directions, I guess, because, in my very working class Puerto Rican family, like there was a lot of yelling, not even out of anger. It's just we talked loud, like we, like, hey, are you talking from room to room, like, like not really a lot of inside voice. The outside voice was the inside voice, right? So, you learn really quickly that that type of boisterous communication in a professional space is not going to fly. So you start kind of like adapting, more measured tones and more, kind of thoughtful ways of phrasing things. And sometimes that bleeds over into communication with your family. And I remember getting looks like, oh, you fancy now, huh? Oh, that's how you talk now. Okay. All right. Okay. Miss therapist, Miss professional. I'm like, I don't have a therapy degree. But like the way that I was, kind of coming across, they thought was like so polished and maybe even like kind of a little pretentious, and they felt like they had to kind of make like a little dig. But it's weird, like that code switching, sometimes bleeds through, and that can unexpectedly create some friction.
Yeah, I got called Joe College. I remember that one.
Joke.
College. Joe College. Yeah, I would say there is that friction that's created because of it, right? So you do start to respond differently. And naturally, like even now in our house, we're loud, right? Loud when we go back home. And then when I get to certain settings, especially professionally, I may change it, right? Because it's just what fits the setting. But at the same time, that's where you start to feel that imbalance. And so, am I selling out? Am I doing the right thing? Because I'm acting different. And I think as a first generation professional, you have to understand it's okay to act different, but you don't lose yourself in that, right? So I'm not going to lose the core of who I am. There's some moments where I'm at work where I may get louder, right? Because that's who I am. But I'm going to judge where I'm at, what I'm doing. Is it appropriate or is it not appropriate? I'm going to judge all those things. But at the same time, like I say, I'm not going to lose authentically who I am. But I'm evolving because now I'm able to discern when and where to use it. And then if I'm going back home, I don't need to be that polished, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand the people around me can take it. They can understand it, and I can understand them. And so that goes to that code switching. It's just learning, right? It's just a whole learning process. And I think that's what's the most difficult is after I graduated college, after I started really to excel as a professional, I didn't want to learn, right? I've learned everything. What else do I have to learn, right? But you start to realize learning is a lifelong thing, and it's important. It's important because you're helping other people learn. You help other people learn how to deal with first generation professionals, and how first generation professionals, you're helping them to learn how to deal with other people at the same time. Because it's all a growing process. Yeah. It really is. It's just a daunting one at times. But yeah, the code switching is real. It's really real. Like even doing this conversation, I keep thinking in my head, can I say this? Can I act like that? Real polished? Do I need to sit back? What do I need to do? Like all those things are going through my head. And I think that's another symptom of being a first range professional. What I'm thinking not be the conversation at all. I'm thinking about more of my presentation, how I'm coming across. What do I look like at this moment? Can I do my neck like that and squint my eyes? Or should I sit back and say, oh, I understand that. It makes sense. Right? So it's one of those things where you're just learning as an individual. And I think the more and more we grow, the more we learn, the better off we'll be.
I mean, that is I think a perfect note to kind of end this on. And I just want to thank you for being so candid and forthcoming. I mean, we actually, like a little over 20 minutes, we covered a few really kind of key challenges, I think, that first gen pros encounter with class migration, from understanding how the family dynamics change to being this kind of like middle class translator, how the pride and the resentment start to maybe collide a little bit, and how that shows up in communication. So I think for me, like what you just said about a first generation professional is always going to have like that internal governor running and saying, okay, what's appropriate for this situation, what's appropriate for this person that I'm speaking to, it's a whole other skill set that I don't know we ever wanted, but it just kind of comes with the territory. And I really appreciate you sharing your insights and shedding a light on what this is like. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to you again. I know we've got a few other topics lined up. Can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. So thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.